Welcome to the Never Ending Backlog podcast, your place for short reviews from a gamer with the goal of reducing his backlog. From adventures to sandboxes, join our host as we walk through a collection of unplayed treasures. Now, let's take a look at the featured game of this episode of the Never Ending Backlog.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Never Ending Backlog podcast. I'm your host Zach, and we're back to normal week. We've done SEGA week, horror week, and now we're back to backlog week. Today we are jumping into a game that I was curious about, however a little apprehensive, as I know games like Port Royale and Tropico look great, however have quite a few complexities, and I try to avoid complicated single-player games for those that are multiplayer instead. Today's game is East India Company Gold, so let's jump right into the review. What is it? According to Steam, in East India Company, players will enjoy building the world's most powerful trading empire and engaging in vigorous battles in both single-player and multiplayer modes, all within a breathtaking cinematic game environment. It is a strategy RTS type game, released in 2009. The developer and publisher is Nitro Games, and they seem to be making a lot of first-person shooter games for mobile devices, more so. However, have a strong interest in pirate-themed games such as Pirates of Black Cove, Woody Two Legs, Sink-em-all, and others in the past. How much is it? Current price, since gold is no longer available in the Steam store, you can purchase East India Company Complete Bundle, which includes all of them, including the DLC, for $14.99, so it's equivalent. Now let's actually jump into the actual review component of this. It installed and ran fine. It's around 3 gigabytes, so it's not terribly large for a 2009 game. It's still relatively large, but not too crazy. Graphics, overall the graphics aren't bad. They are from 2009, so you have to judge accordingly. Other PC strategy games that were released in 2009 were Empire, Total War, and World in Conflict Complete Edition, both of which had pretty attractive graphics for the RTS category. So I would say East India is probably a little worse than them, graphic-wise. You know, it's a fairly basic-looking Caribbean pirate trader type of game. You zoom out and see the entire map, so kind of like Civilization as well. But overall, graphics aren't too bad at all. Audio, the soundtrack is nice, the voiceovers work well, and overall it's decent. There is no amazing Pirates of the Caribbean-like score, so it's kind of missing that. However, the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise soundtrack ruined nearly anything pirate-related for me. Except I will say I am a huge fan of Sea of Thieves and their soundtrack, especially when you're on a small ship sailing out into the ocean and you start sailing into a storm and you stand on the bow of your ship playing an instrument, usually the harpsichord or something along those lines. Man, that game is beautiful. Those moments remind me of the movie The Page Master when they are sailing through Moby Dick's story, and it's hauntingly empty. It's just a gorgeous soundtrack. So, you know, big fan of Pirates of the Caribbean, their soundtrack. Big fan of Sea of Thieves, playing your own music. There's a specific song in Sea of Thieves, and in fact, actually, after doing this review, I jumped back into Sea of Thieves and started playing then. For those of you that are not aware, Sea of Thieves is a PC game. It's also on the Xbox as well, or Xbox One. It's a pirate game made by Rare. They're the group that made the Perfect Dark series and I think Banjo-Kazooie. Really, really cool game. It kind of came out very similar to No Man's Sky, where a lot of people felt like there just wasn't a lot of content. But they're still releasing content for this game, and it came out quite a few years ago. Really, really fun. It's very well done. It's a beautiful game. It is co-op, so you can have your friends, and you guys can sail on a ship together, and there are quests and different islands you can explore. It reminds me, there's a game that came out on the Xbox, and I don't remember the name of it, but you play, I cannot remember. You play as a woman pirate, and you explore all these islands and such, and you just sail around. And like I said, it was on the original Xbox. It might have been on other systems, but I remember playing it on the Xbox. And it was a terrific game. You dig up treasure. And it wasn't Pirates of the Caribbean. I had that one for the Xbox as well. It was a different game. It's like, I cannot remember it, but I'll try to look it up if I can. But no, like I said, this game's, East India Company's game is fine. But when you have games like Sea of Thieves out there and their soundtrack, oof, it's hard to beat it. Controls are pretty easy to use. It's a hybrid of keyboard and mouse, and both work effectively. Nothing really jumps out as complicated or poorly placed. I mean, it is what it is. It's basically point and click. You know, for gameplay, essentially you build a trading empire and battle pirates and other factions. It has 2 modes in the game itself. The RTS component, where you establish shipping routes, ports to visit, and other RTS-like elements. Think of setting trade routes in Age of Empires, Rise of Nations, or the Civilization games, where you basically set point to point. And you can also control the direct battle mode, where you control your fleet and battle the enemy. Both work well, and overall it didn't seem too challenging. It's cool to see both modes, because when you're doing like the overview of the trade routes, you have like one ship moving, but it's actually a combination of actually 5 ships in that fleet, but you don't see those until you actually go into battle mode, but that works pretty well. Regarding difficulty, fortunately there was robust tutorials. Honestly, like the tutorials were really well done, and there was a ton of them. So it helped me kind of get my feet wet. They explain nearly everything in pretty detailed snippets. There's a lot of snippets, but there's also an in-game tutorial, so it felt extremely helpful, as I mentioned in the past about those type of games. The game was made in 2009, so it doesn't look like there are any achievements for this game. This wasn't like a remake. This was just an older game that was released on Steam. And we'll just jump right into the pros and cons. For pros, it's a nice Caribbean getaway in times like these. Get you out on the beach. The battles are cool looking, which I thought was nice. Though I have seen many of the bad reviews saying the DLC doesn't work and the game is buggy and it crashes a lot, I honestly haven't seen any of that. It worked really well on my computer. Not sure if it's older computers. Some of the reviews were from like 2014, 2015. It might have just been older computers that were having a hard time, but mine had no issues whatsoever, which is really nice. Regarding some of the cons, it's sometimes concerning when you see an RTS, like really concerning when you see an RTS with a few typos and issues with the structure. It makes you kind of wonder how rushed it was. And I'll jump into that in a second, what I mean by that. Another con is I thought it was going to be a very technical, challenging game. Like I said, like Point Royale and stuff. But the tutorial didn't really seem to imply that at all. If anything, it seemed pretty basic in the end. This is still a heavily trading economy-based game, so that game type might not be for everyone. Don't jump into thinking you're playing Assassin's Creed Black Flag or Sid Meier's Pirates. This is far more balanced your checkbook type of game. Not in a bad way, it's kind of mode you expect to play. And regarding some interesting stories from this game, there's a typo on Tactical Tutorial 4 out of 24, Strengths, so there's a typo there. Also, the first tutorial said it's the second tutorial, and the second tutorial says the third tutorial, but I never saw the first tutorial. Also, East India Company Gold doesn't seem to be available anymore, so the details for this game will be kind of taken from East India Company by itself. So, my description I mentioned earlier, all of that's from East India Company. The first one, not the expansion packs or the DLCs. I do have those, and I probably could have read into those more, but I pretty much spent most of my time playing East India Company, the first game. Some tips: you can't actually manually turn the game to windowed mode. However, if you want to, or an easier way to adjust settings, go into your My Documents folder on PC and edit the file inside East India, then the config file. You want to change windowed to 1 instead of 0. So it's, text-based settings changes. A lot of games do that. A lot of older ones do that. It works really well. And would I recommend this game? Honestly, I'd probably say no on this one. It seems a little bit too simple for me personally. Yet you can see where the variables would either work for you or against you immediately. It doesn't seem like it's one of those games where the odds are in your favor, and those type of games just frustrate me. It's just a slower paced game. I think there are better games out there. Like I said, the Port Royale series I heard is amazing. I have a couple of the old physical copies of those that I'll probably try out in future episodes. I think, like I mentioned, this is an okay game. It seemed kind of abandoned. The player base is quite small. Multiplayer, I think I'd try it out with my friend, but like I said, a lot of it is traders and stuff like that. And I can play a Age of Empires or Civilization or Rise of Nations and get that same experience of the trading routes and stuff like that, and probably have a little bit of a better time. So that was my review of East India Company Gold. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you on the next episode.